And the U.S. experiencing record low numbers of first-time home buyers as
warnings and concerns about the housing market.
America's housing crisis is showing no signs of easing.
Prices remain stubbornly high.
You've probably seen all the same headlines I've seen. The housing market's collapsing, prices are plummeting, days on market are soaring, and if you're just tuning into the national news, it's easy to think about the worst case scenario and that it's already here, that the real estate market is a terrible place to invest your money, and that we're heading into something that's even worse than the 2008 crash that we experienced. But here's the truth. Real estate is actually very local, okay? So what's happening here in Southern Oregon is a very different story than what's happening in New York, LA, Florida, Texas, and on, right? So let's break down what's actually happening here. So first off, the fact is you can make the data tell whatever story it is that you actually want to tell. So if you wanted to paint a picture of a doom and gloom scenario, here's what you'd say. Sales volume is down significantly from the highs of 2021 and 2022. But if you wanted to paint a more accurate, more positive picture, you'd say something like this. Volume is up significantly from 2023 lows, and we've seen steady improvement even with rates still elevated. Both are true. To show you what I mean, let's actually talk about some of the numbers from Jackson and Josephine counties, looking at single-family residential homes and looking at Q2, okay, the second quarter of the year, which is generally the busiest quarter for real estate. So we look into that quarter and we go all the way back to 2021. We saw $618 million in volume back then in that quarter, and rates were 3%. Okay, we go to the next year, 2022, we saw $650 million in volume. Huge quarter, probably the biggest quarter Southern Oregon had ever seen, in at least for a very, very, very long time. Probably ever though. And the rates at that time were 5.2%. So it was right as things were starting to really go up. Q2 of 2023 went to 423 million, and then the following year, 447 million, and then the following year 491 million, and in that time rates went from 6.5 to 7 to 6.8. So what we saw there is that even with rates in the mid to high sixes, so from 2023 to 2025, the market has really climbed almost $50 million in the last year alone, okay? And that, in my opinion, is a sign of strength. So again, rates stayed pretty high and the market still improved in terms of volume, the number of transactions that happened. It went up by $50 million. But what about prices, okay? Let's talk about that. Let's take a look at the median home price for Jackson and Josephine County single-family residential homes. If we go all the way back to February of 2018, okay, the median home price back then was $275,000, and I picked that date because it was right before things really started to take off. So if you look at February of 2022, 4 years later, the median home price is $440,000, all right? And that's a 60% increase in that amount of time. Since then, the median home price has stayed right about the same at about $440,000, $450,000, despite much less volume compared to that high that we talked about of Q2 of 2022. So again, much less transactions happening here locally than back in 2022, but the median home price and home values have maintained a relatively flat place, and it's kind of segmented because there's some places in the market where it's gone down a little bit, and there's others where it's gone up a little bit. You know, new construction, for example, has probably gone up a little bit, and some rural, you know, remote type properties maybe has gone down a little bit. So it's all averages out to about being equal, okay? But the story here is that there has not been a major crash. There's not been any sort of free fall, and we've seen just stability in a healthy market. So what's important to know about that is even in a time, like I said, where we've had a big decrease in volume, we've maintained a healthy market. So if you are in a market where that isn't the case, then I would really invite you to learn more about our local market here in Southern Oregon by downloading our relocation guide, which you can do by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now. Or if you're using a computer or a phone right now, you can just click on the link in the description of this video and download that guide, and it has all sorts of useful information about buying and selling real estate here in Southern Oregon. But let's move on and let's talk about inventory now. So inventory is a great number to look at if you want to really know what's going on in a local market. So again, let's go back to July of 2022, and we had 3.4 months of inventory here in Southern Oregon, okay? Flash forward to July of 2025, 4.6 months. Okay, and so for some perspective there, January of 2008 was 22 months of inventory, right? And that was the peak. That was the worst we'd ever seen. But now, again, we're at 4.6. So we went from about 3.5 in 2022 to about 4.5 in 2025. So not a huge difference. Like, yeah, that is a bit of an increase. It did tick up, but it wasn't dramatic, okay? And that tells us that buyers and sellers are still staying relatively balanced. So that's important to note, that again, in that same time period, you had no surge of distressed sellers, no collapsing of demand, just a market doing what markets do, which is adjusting, adapting, and moving forward. But here's the truth that you probably actually know already, and you maybe don't want to hear, and that is that mortgage rates are the throttle to the real estate market, right? So lower rates equal acceleration, higher rates equal brakes. And we've all been saying the same thing for years since 2022 when things really took off, and that's that rates need to come down and that we expect them to, okay? We figured that, Biden's gonna want them low so he has a better chance of being reelected, and then Trump's gonna want them low so that he can get a big win early to help the economy. And more recently, inflation's cooling, so surely, the Fed's gonna start cutting the rates. And yet here we are again, still with mortgage rates hovering in the mid-6 range. So the big question I have is, what if this is it? What if this is what we're gonna see for a while now? So if you're one of those that's been waiting for a crash so you can buy low, or for rates to drop so you can afford more, you might be in for something worse, which is years of sitting on the sidelines waiting for something that never actually happens, okay? The Southern Oregon real estate market is not crashing, okay? It is evolving, it is adapting. And if rates stay between the 6% and the 7% range, I think we're gonna see exactly what we have been seeing, which is gradual growth in sales volume, stable home values, a balanced, healthy market, and a handful of holdouts who think that they're gonna see 2009 prices again. But unless you have a time machine, that ain't happening. So see, we are in a unique market where we have a lot of folks who are relocating to Southern Oregon for good reason. The low cost of living, the great weather, the loads of outdoor recreational activities, good medical care, great location on the West Coast that's easy to access anything, and the list goes on. It's a desirable area that people want to move to, and that creates consistent demand. So when you pair that with the fact that we're not quite large enough to attract these big national builders who do the huge developments that flood the market with inventory and drive prices down, it puts us in really a sweet spot where we have a good balance of supply and demand. So if that's something that sounds appealing to you, reach out to me with a call, text, or an email, and I'd be more than happy to chat with you to see if Southern Oregon might be a good fit for you. Look, I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. I'm here to help you see the real picture of what's happening here in Southern Oregon. So if you want real, honest advice about buying or selling or investing in Southern Oregon, reach out anytime. I'm Brian Simmons with the Buying Southern Oregon Real Estate Team. And if you want to understand the Southern Oregon real estate market better than 99% of the people out there, check out this other video right here. Thank you for watching this one. I'll see you on that video.